In April 2020, two of the most powerful people in Hollywood and Silicon Valley launched a streaming app they promised would change the way the world watched television. They had $1.75 billion in funding. They had A-list talent: Idris Elba, LeBron James, Steven Spielberg. They had years of planning, a former Disney chairman as CEO, and a former eBay and HP executive as president. 6 months later, it was dead. Not struggling, not pivoting, dead. Shut down, employees laid off, assets sold for pennies on the dollar. Investors watching over $1 billion evaporate in less time than it takes to plan a wedding. This is the story of Quibi, and how two of the most smartest business minds in America built a company so carefully, so confidently, and so wrong that it became one of the fastest, most expensive failures in the history of entertainment. To understand how it collapsed this fast, you have to understand how it was built, because the mistakes weren't accidents. They were baked into the foundation from day one. The idea started with Jeffrey Katzenberg, the man who helped build DreamWorks Animation and ran Disney's film studio for years. Katzenberg believed he had spotted a gap in the market: short-form video made from mobile phones, but produced with the budget and quality of a real Hollywood studio. Not amateur YouTube content, not TikTok clips. Premium cinematic shows, just broken into chapters under 10 minutes long, designed to be watched during what Katzenberg called in-between moments: waiting in line, riding the subway, sitting on the toilet, as he once bluntly put it in interviews. He called it Quibi, short for Quick Bites. To run it, Katzenberg brought in Meg Whitman, the former CEO of eBay and HP, a business operator with a reputation for discipline and scale. Together, they pitched the idea to investors as the missing piece between Hollywood-quality storytelling and the mobile-first habits of a new generation. Investors believed them. Disney, NBC Universal, Sony, Warner Media, Alibaba, Goldman Sachs, and dozens of others poured in $1.75 billion before the app had ever gone live. It remains one of the largest amounts of funding ever raised by a media startup or launch. Quibi signed deals with major stars and studios. Steven Spielberg created an original horror series exclusively for the platform. Chrissy Teigen hosted a cooking show. Reese Witherspoon, Idris Elba, Liam Hemsworth, Kevin Hart, and dozens more A-listers signed on. The content budget alone was estimated at over $100 million just for the first slate of shows. On paper, it looked unstoppable. Hollywood talent, Silicon Valley leadership, billions in funding, and a technology idea nobody else had committed to at this scale. But underneath the glossy pitch decks, there were already 3 problems quietly forming, and none of them had anything to do with the quality of the shows. Quibi launched on April 6, 2020, with a marketing campaign that included a Super Bowl ad and a promotional blitz that cost tens of millions of dollars. The app arrived with 50 original shows ready on day one, an enormous content library compared to most launches. Reviews of the actual content were mixed, but not disastrous. Some shows, like the Sophie Turner series Survive and the Spielberg horror anthology 50 States of Fright, received decent attention. Quibi's core innovation was something called turnstile, technology that let a video seamlessly switch between vertical and horizontal orientation depending on how you held your phone, without cropping or distorting the picture. It was a genuinely clever piece of engineering, one that took years and significant investment to build. And that's exactly where the first crack appeared. Katzenberg and Whitman had spent years and tens of millions of dollars perfecting a mobile-only viewing experience. Quibi could not be cast to a TV. It could not be watched on a laptop. It could not be shared as a clip on social media in the early months, which meant none of its content could go viral the way competitors' content did. They had built the technology for a world that no longer matched the moment they were launching into. Quibi launched on April 6, 2020, 3 weeks after most of the United States went into COVID-19 lockdown. The entire business model was built around in-between moments: commutes, waiting rooms, gym breaks, airport lines. Katzenberg had designed Quibi for people constantly on the move. In April 2020, almost nobody was on the move. Commutes had disappeared. Waiting rooms were empty. People were sitting at home in front of large TVs with more free time than they'd ever had. And Quibi's biggest technical achievement, mobile-only viewing, had just become its biggest liability. You couldn't even cast the app to the TV sitting a few feet away. Katzenberg later admitted publicly that he believed COVID-19 was the primary reason for Quibi's failure. Most business analysts who studied the collapse point to deeper structural problems that existed before the pandemic ever began. Mistake 1: pricing
and access. Quibi charged a subscription fee in a market full of free ad-supported short-form content on YouTube and TikTok. There was no free trial content people could share to build word of mouth, and for months after launch, no ability to screenshot, clip, or share content on social media at all. In an era where a platform's growth engine is built on shareability, Quibi disabled the exact mechanism that drives modern audience discovery. Mistake 2. No clear identity. Quibi tried to be Hollywood and TikTok at the same time. It had Hollywood budgets and Hollywood stars, TikTok-length runtimes. That left it too expensive and unfamiliar for the short-form audience, and too short and choppy for people who wanted the payoff of a full Hollywood production. It didn't fully satisfy either audience. Mistake 3. Leadership blind spots. Katzenberg and Whitman were both extraordinarily experienced, but both came from a pre-social media, pre-TikTok generation of media. Multiple former employees and reporters covering the launch noted that leadership repeatedly overruled product recommendations that would have brought Quibi closer to the sharing and community-driven behavior audiences actually wanted, insisting instead on the original vision of exclusive, closed platform content. By the end of the first month, Quibi had roughly 1.7 million downloads, but a subscriber conversion and retention rate far below what investors were told to expect. By June 2020, multiple reports indicated fewer than 10% of users who downloaded the app were still active. The company scrambled to add screenshot and social sharing functionality months after launch, support that should have existed from day one, but the damage to momentum was already done. Katzenberg and Whitman tried to raise a new round of funding to keep the company alive into 2021. They were unable to secure it. On October 21, 2020, a little over 6 months after launch, Katzenberg and Whitman announced Quibi was shutting down. In their public letter to employees, they stated they had considered every option, including selling the company, but could not find a viable path forward. Roughly 200 employees lost their jobs. Investors who had put in $1.75 billion were left with a business that some analysts valued its remaining tech and content library at as little as $100 million when it was eventually sold off. The turnstile patents to Roku and other content licenses distributed piecemeal to different buyers. It stands as one of the most expensive failures in modern media history and one of the fastest. Most companies take years to burn through this much capital and collapse. Quibi did it in under 7 months of public operation. So what actually killed Quibi? It wasn't the quality of the shows. Critics generally agreed the production values were genuinely impressive. It wasn't the talent. Quibi had some of the biggest names in the industry. It was 3 things happening at once. A mobile-only product launched into a moment when the entire world moved off mobile and into their living rooms, a subscription paywall in a market trained on free content, and a leadership team so confident in their original vision that they were slow to listen to the signals the market was already sending them. The lesson every business student and entrepreneur takes from Quibi isn't don't trust experienced executives or don't spend big on talent. It's that even the most experienced leaders backed by the most money can fail if they build a perfect answer to a question the market stopped asking. Timing, distribution, and the willingness to adapt quickly matter more than budget, talent, or technology. Quibi didn't fail because it lacked resources. It failed because $1.75 billion couldn't buy back the 6 months it needed to change course.